Welcome to Do It in Durham, the 11th annual Durham celebration of global entrepreneurship, which is an exciting time of year for all of us who are part of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the Durham region. It is held each November. It is the second week of November almost every year, actually every year so far. It's actually 16 years. For us, it's 11 years doing it in Durham, Do It in Durham. It's a collaboration of Durham's business support, educational, and networking organizations who have come together to encourage and support you, the entrepreneurs, job creators, and innovators who create economic growth in the Durham region. If you're looking to start a business, invest in a business, grow a business, we encourage you to do it in Durham, the Durham region. Thank you to all our amazing sponsors, without whom we could not put all of this incredible information, resources, opportunity to meet with subject matter experts like Sharai here, and we could not host this week. So we're so grateful to everybody who's come together. I have put some general information in the chat. Please take this opportunity to reach out, put some information in the chat. If you are a new business owner or a business owner, this is a great opportunity to still network a little bit in the chat. And we are going to do a recording of this one. It's already started recording, and it will be found on our YouTube channel under Business Advisory Center of Durham. Thank you so much for joining us. Over to you, Sharai.
All right, now you're ready for me. Okay. All right. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you all for being here in person. And if you happen to be watching this later, I know that time is valuable. So thank you so much for spending your time with me. And if you're interested in connecting with me personally after this presentation, you should be able to see my social media handles and website there. Feel free to shoot me a message. I'm happy to connect and respond and get to know each other better. And if you're feeling particularly enthusiastic, like Patrice was saying, engagement is always nice. So feel free, I give you full creative control to take snapshots, pictures of today's presentation and share it to your social media channels. Nothing's off limits with me. I'll try to look pretty the whole time, but I can't promise anything. So do as many retakes as you need. And be sure to tag me, as well as use the Do It in Durham hashtags that you see listed on the presentation there. Now, again, we talked about how engagement makes the whole experience richer. So if you have any questions along the way, feel free to drop them in the chat. I am trying to monitor it as I'm running through my presentation, but if anything gets missed as well, we'll be able to kind of review it at the end with Q&A. So don't feel like you have been missed. And lastly, also, you have the ability to use, I think, let's make sure, little emoji reactions at the bottom of your screen if you're on your computer or on your phone. It kind of helps me kind of gauge where you're at, or if you're confused. There we go, Patrice, thank you. I can't see all of you, but that's a good one. So feel free, if you have a response to a question of mine or something, if that's easier than using the chat, do that as well. So let me get going. Okay, so let me introduce myself. My name is Sharai. I know it's a strange spelling, so just don't pay attention to it. Rhymes with, you know, the wine. Think of Journey, the song. There's lots of things that you can kind of think about. And I've been running the Sozo Studio for about, what year are we? So it's officially been 4 years, but I'm actually coming to you today with over 15 years of experience, both in corporate and entrepreneurial expertise in branding. And I do run it out of Pickering, but run my entire business virtually. And really focusing on strategy-led branding, which really is just a fancy way of saying turning your business into a vibrant brand that really resonates deeply with the people you're working with and the kind of audiences you're trying to connect with. And so that all kind of starts from the inside out with my methodology, which is really just about you owning your brand and your brand story. Now, what I like to do before I get too far into the meat of the presentation is kind of get a pulse on where you're at and see how this topic resonates with you personally. And I do that by kind of asking some questions to get you kind of thinking of, again, how this can connect with you. And so the first one I want you to kind of think of, and be curious if anyone else relates to this, because I've had this issue where you find yourself nestling into bed, you think you're going to, settle down, and then your brain decides that's the perfect time for a brainstorming session with all the ideas, all the anxiety, all the things that you're stressing about in your business because you're needing that clarity. And so that's something that I used to struggle with a lot, if maybe you can relate. Secondly, have you ever found yourself, especially when it comes to brand voice, kind of rewriting, editing on endless loop, word tinkering, wordsmithing, posts, newsletters, whatever it might be in the written word, and you still don't feel like it sounds like you? It's almost like kind of having a split personality, because one day you sound this way and the next day you're not so sure. So I've had that problem too, but as we work through this, there are going to be some strategies I give you to help kind of eliminate that. And so then on that topic and kind of on that note, just try to imagine, yes, it's possible, kind of that confidence you'll have when you have that unwavering trust that really what you're putting out there, it might not be perfect, but you trust that it's going to magnetize and going to effortlessly draw in the right people who you really connect with. And so to kind of summarize how we're going to tackle all that, today we're going to learn what makes up a brand voice, understand why you need one and kind of the critical elements of it, and then also give you some hands-on exercises and strategies on how you can start crafting your own brand voice that really brings in those leads effortlessly. And so that way, once you have all of this under your tool belt, the idea is that you can say goodbye to all those kind of cringe-worthy networking endeavors that just don't feel authentic to you, those kind of sales pitches that maybe you're sending cold emails or cold DMs, and kind of that ever-shifting struggle that I was just talking about, and trade that in so that you can get more time back to really embrace what really motivated you in the first place to start your business or your company or whatever the work you're doing, and really tap back into what lights you up. So, like I said, why do I need a brand voice? Well, I didn't always pay attention to that aspect of my brand. And yes, I come from a background of branding. Now, the content that we present, obviously the clarity of it, it's important, it holds significance. But when it comes to a brand voice, the way we convey it is equally vital, or I might even say more important. And why that is because the voice of your brand is what captures the attention of your ideal clients, making sure that they take notice, but more importantly, that they see you as that safe, credible authority. It's really about building that, customer loyalty and long-term growth so that you get those referrals and recommendations coming back to you. And so, like I said, I neglected my own brand voice, treated it as an afterthought. And unfortunately for me, it meant that my path felt a bit disingenuous. I came from a corporate background where I was fitting into a cookie cutter mold, and I was attracting the wrong kind of people. I mean, I think you can kind of relate when I say that I was attracting the type where they want everything cheap, fast, and flawless, which is a combination that is impossible. And so really shifting gears and focusing on, okay, now how do I sound? How do I come across? How does my team come across when they represent the work that we're doing? So that way we are attracting and working with the type of people who best benefit from our services and our products. And that's the key point. This isn't just about what we get out of it. It's also, we want to see those who are consuming our product, our services, really benefit and really get transformation out of it. And so this is what's going to help kind of bring those two together so they are the perfect fit. And so if I haven't drilled it in enough, lacking a brand voice, it means that you have a confused and trusting audience who are not mutually the best fit. And so your messaging is scattered, it's out of sync with your values, and it's not as effective at showing your expertise in whatever area you have. And like I said, that confusion, yes, it brings in the wrong crowd, but it also can leave those who do trust you or kind of, maybe this is the right fit for me. It erodes that trust and confidence in your ability to actually deliver on it. So that's why this is so, so crucial. And I see, just taking a moment to look at the chat, doesn't look like there's any questions, so I'm going to keep going. Okay, so I want you to think of a polished brand voice as kind of like having the kind of illustration that I use is, imagine you're coming into somebody's home, it's a party, and you encounter this charming host or hostess, and they just make you feel so welcome and like you belong. And so again, that's what a brand voice is all about. It's about making you feel like, even if you've never been there before, that they understand your needs, your desires, your desire to belong, and that they also are representative of that home. You don't want a host of a party to be completely disconnected from whoever's running the scene behind the scenes. And so it's not about being cheesy, not about being artificial, and it's not even being the loudest in the room or the showy-ish, which I know you probably hear a lot like stand out. I'm actually not a big proponent of the necessary standout. If, we can come across as genuine even with the quietest of voices. So I want you to keep that in the back of your mind. Now, so it's time to roll up our sleeves and start learning about the art of crafting a brand voice so that it does strike that perfect chord with our audience and leaves them yelling encore, 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 because that's the goal of what we want to do. And so when we talk about brand voice, I've been throwing it around a lot, I know. So I want to kind of give you a better definition, and that it's the voice that your business uses to communicate to your audience and customers. And it's really the collective impression of what your brand conveys through its messaging, its content, other forms of communication. It can be anything as simple as an onboarding email, as simple as a reminder email. You can make sure that your brand voice carries through all that. And by making sure you have a consistent brand voice, you are making sure that the language is strategic, it's well aligned, it evokes emotion, it sets the tone, and you're choosing vocabulary very deliberately. So to ensure that your brand is that kind of has that irresistible touch to it, you need to infuse it with that personality and emotions to kind of create a human-esque aspect to it. And so you're not only trying to look the part, which I'm sure you've heard of logos, fonts, colors, all the visual aspect, but it's important to focus on how you sound as well to establish that personal connection. And so your brand voice really does transcend mere words. It's that intangible quality that makes your brand instantly recognizable, relatable, unforgettable. Kind of like if we go back to what I was sharing about that host for a party, that you could probably hear them from 20 feet away and you know exactly who's speaking. I'm sure you can all think of one friend like that you're like, I know who that is. And so not only does it get you recognized, but it creates those heck yes moments that this presentation is titled off, that they wholeheartedly embrace and resonate with your brand's message and identity. And that's really the vehicle that helps deliver that full brand experience. Oh, look at that. See, I've been so busy talking that I'm not even moving ahead my presentation. I'll just take a few seconds to pause there in case anybody is taking notes. All right, so what makes up a brand voice? So I'll be candid, like this is going to be my kind of a specific approach and methodology of what I think makes the most sense when you are focusing on a brand voice. And so the first that I like to focus on is what I call the accent. And the accent, if you think of like speaking, there are different regions, there are different countries, there's slang. What it is you're encompassing a feeling and an impact, which again creates that human aspect to your brand. And people naturally seek connections and relationships and want to relate to what you have. So when you're figuring out what the attributes are to your brand, you can then kind of correlate that into a distinct brand voice accent. So like I said, when people hear you from afar, they know who's speaking and they stop to listen. The next thing that I focus on is what I call the archetype. If you've ever done any kind of branding exercise, you might be familiar with the 12 core archetypes. This is really just a fancy word for a personality type, again, bringing in that human aspect to your brand. And this lets you infuse personality into your language, into your messaging. And again, I hope you hear that there's no right or wrong way to do that. Personality does not mean you have to be a big showy person. Personality can be quiet, can be meek, can be pensive and thoughtful. That's why it's so important to take time and really think, okay, what is the personality type of my brand, so that I can kind of make that memorable and set the overall tone in my entire brand. And then next we have what I call the adventure. I'm just trying to stick with the alliteration there, but really that's the brand narrative, the brand story. And people fall in love with people, and not just logos and graphics or visuals or even really words. So by creating a story, you're bringing in conflict that can evoke emotions. And the conflict is simple as, I think I saw a money coach, she was saying something about the chaos to calm. And that's right there a brand narrative, that there's a conflict, there's a roadblock in the way for our ideal client, but then our voice needs to line up with where we're taking them, that kind of story, that adventure, and bringing them on a journey that's engaging and feels bigger than a business card, because I hope our hearts are bigger than that. And I think they are. And then lastly, articulation. So articulation really boils down to the specific messaging. And that really involves making sure that you're intentional in types of words and vocabulary that you're using, that helps intensify that kind of brand narrative, that emotional connection. And it includes considering things like the values of your brand, the tone, and also, like I've said, kind of the do's and don'ts of what you say and what you don't say, because that's just equally as important. Now, how to craft a compelling brand voice. So my first step that I always recommend, know your brand. You need to know internally, work from the inside out, what you represent, what you stand for, so that it can all be cohesive into how you sound and in your messaging. It's also important to know your audience. Something that I kind of flip backwards is I don't start with market research first. I always like to dig deep into who you are as an individual, if you're the founder and whoever else is on your team, because you're the one driving the ship. And that's going to naturally influence the business decisions and the way you market and the way you brand. But it's important that you do take that next step to know your audience, because you want to find that overlap. You're over here, your audience is over here, and you're trying to find that sweet spot right there in that kind of Venn diagram. Third, speak their language, and I'm going to go into more details about all of these. And then lastly, I've kind of touched on it quite a bit, is humanize your brand. And you can kind of see how I've related them, that the accent kind of correlates to the brand attributes. Then knowing your audience is that brand story. The articulation is speaking their language. And the archetype, that personality aspect, is humanizing your brand. Know your brand. So first of all, you want to identify the heart of your brand, kind of the heartbeat. And it's about understanding what sets you apart. It's the brand and business core values and the impact it aspires to make. And when you maintain that cohesion and alignment in your brand, you're laying the foundation for that trust and establishing authority in your specific niche. And so, like I've said before, it means working from the inside out, so that every aspect, from the visuals to the voice to all other elements, resonate harmoniously. Because when you're all consistent in that regard, then people will trust what you're offering, what you're selling them. And then what I also recommend is to put it on paper, write out your vision, mission, and values. And specifically, what I consider a vision is really the compass to your business. It's charting the course for the future you aim to create through your business and the impact you seek to have within your sphere of influence. And your mission in term is a bit more practical. It's actually outlining the strategic steps you're going to take, or the strategic approach you'll follow to realize that vision, to realize your brand motivations, and guide your audience in that brand narrative to that new envisioned future that they're hoping to experience. And lastly, your brand values. It just really represents kind of a fundamental set of beliefs that not only shape the company's behavior and the brand and the marketing, but has a profound influence on the voice as well. So that all of these working together is going to build out that brand narrative and help you establish a consistent brand voice. Next is know your audience. And this is so pivotal too, because knowing your audience is really, I want to make sure that I'm clear in that it's not about fitting into a mold. And that's why I recommend start with you, start with your why, start with the inside out, because what you're finding is the people who are going to overlap, those are the dream matches. Those are the people who are going to fall in love with your product, fall in love with your service. They're going to rave about you, which honestly, the best business booster is referrals and recommendations, so that it keeps those leads coming in without having to wake up in the middle of the night and be brainstorming, where are you going to get that next sale? So how we do that, first, I recommend that you kind of discern themes and patterns within your target demographic. So one way you can do this is dive into your existing content, if you have any existing marketing, and see if there's a voice or a tone that kind of repeats itself that has naturally emerged. Because I wouldn't recommend trying to do anything so different from what is naturally you. You don't have to concoct something out of thin air. I mean, you probably have a lot at your fingertips already that you can kind of highlight words or emotions to see what those common themes are. What type of words are you using? And maybe you actually need to kind of sit with it and think, well, does this even feel genuine? Does this feel forced? Is it natural? Does it feel contrived? And assess whether what you're auditing actually feels aligned with what you're hoping to accomplish. And so that way you can make sure you're reflecting on it to see, okay, is my brand being perceived and leaving the impression that I want? So that way you can kind of fine tune maybe an existing brand voice you already have so that it resonates more authentically with your audience, and making sure that you have a more meaningful and lasting connection with those people. And I was kind of talking about that, you know, looking at the themes of your content, but auditing it is also a bit more of a strategic aspect. And specifically when I say audit, I really mean compare what has been your best performing content and identify what common threads are in that, because there's so many facets to what we're selling. Yes, we have to pay attention to, okay, is the product a good fit? Does it fit their desires and needs? But oftentimes when we're presenting or we're selling or we're pitching, whatever it might be, the way we're conveying it all is so crucial. And so look at what worked well and kind of identify that. And then on the flip side, analyze what didn't work so well. Because sometimes when you're trying to build out your brand voice or your brand in any capacity, knowing what not to do or what doesn't work is easier for a starting point. So that way, then you can kind of flow into, okay, I know what not to do. So that means I need to do X. And then, oops, I went backwards, speaking their language. So what I would recommend is try to figure out where your target audience is hanging out. It can be in person, it can be on social media, and really pay attention to what they're saying. And a lot of times, even if you just read, sometimes it's just amusing to get involved or to kind of get the popcorn and watch all the comments. But even the most aggressive of kind of conversations on social media might come across as, well, this is pointless. This is just creating animosity. But there's a lot to be learned through it too, because you can really see what is kind of triggering people. What is the good aspect? What is the not so good? And that will help you kind of identify, okay, so what specific language, what words, or what approach really kickstarted that? And what kind of words are they using to convey that? So like I said, Pay close attention to the specific words they're using, take note of those emotionally charged comments, but also the positive ones. So maybe there's a raving review somewhere for another company, and you can pick out the words there. And on that note, don't just do market research of your audience. You can also do it of other businesses that might contrast your offerings. And you can see what reviews are saying about that company that maybe have similarities. And you can learn a lot from the feedback, both positive and negative, for other companies as well. And so one thing I would love to kind of convey to is, yes, it's about identifying the kind of language they use. But when I say speak their language, what is the purpose of language? It's a dialogue. It's a conversation. It's not just about conveying information. So when we're using their language, it's essentially creating a bridge in between you so that you can kind of engage in that meaningful dialogue and have that kind of two-way street experience. And lastly, for speaking their language, as I kind of mentioned, reviewing other companies' reviews, I would also recommend you do the same of your own. If you're not currently getting feedback from any of your past clients, please do go back and say, hey, I just have a few questions for you. I would recommend even having very structured questions that they can fill out. When I have the hot tip there, ask them, it means, okay, let me know how you felt before my product or service, and let me know how you feel now, because that will give you a lot of information to fill in the gaps. And then lastly, write down, again, very similar, you're kind of auditing their feedback, what emotions they conveyed. Maybe you can kind of read between the lines and reuse even the analogies they're using. Maybe, like I said, oh, I used to stay up all night thinking about this, and now I can just, my head hits the pillow and I'm good to go. Things like that, that's natural language that they're going to use, and reuse it in your own messaging. And for the last step on how you can actually craft your brand voice is by humanizing it. Kind of mentioned earlier about that accent and brand attributes. So what I would recommend is you identify 3 to 4 words within 3 core areas, which is the feeling you want them to have, the impact that you're hoping to achieve as well, and the voice, literally how you sound. And the difference between feeling and impact is feeling, I can feel inspired, I can feel motivated, but the impact that you're going to have on them is a bit more tangible or more concrete. So I'm inspired to take action, so I have confidence. I feel motivated, but what you've really given me is clarity and confidence. So identifying words in each of those sections and then relating them to the brand voice can be a really helpful way to start. And next, develop that personality. Like I said, people trust people, people fall in love with people. And when you've identified those brand adjectives, you can now kind of distill them into themes that really develop a brand personality. And so imagine your brand as a person who reflects these adjectives. Literally name them if you have to, kind of visualize them in your head. Imagine the type of messaging or the communication style that this person would use and how they would sound, and then translate those same characteristics and how they carry themselves into how you sound. Now, for the last few minutes of our presentation, I have a few exercises. So you'll definitely want to take some notes because we won't be able to fit it all in now, but you can choose whatever aligns best. There is no right or wrong. You might find some overlaps if you do all these exercises, but I do encourage you to take some time to really sit down and pick 1 or 2 of these and see what comes out of it. So one of the first exercises that I often will do is, we've talked about those brand values. So once you've picked those 3 to 5 words in each of those sections, the voice, feeling, impact, then link it to how you would sound. So again, if a attribute is you want to be a bold personality, Well, you probably want to sound empowering. That kind of relates. You don't want a meek or quiet or gentle kind of sound, because they'll have that kind of contrast that just won't make sense for your audience. And ask yourself, how does my audience want to feel, and what do they need to hear to feel and experience that brand adjective or value? Next is making a do's and don'ts list. I hinted at that earlier. And what it is you want to come up with a list first of how you don't want to sound. I think it's easier sometimes to say, okay, I don't want to be like this. And so you review those statements or those adjectives and say, okay, I don't want to be A, B, C, D. Well, that means if I kind of flip it on its side and reverse it, that means I'm going to need to sound like X, Y, Z. And an example is don'ts. So this is just an example more about my studio's personal brand, is don't be impersonal, don't overuse jargon, don't be arrogant or lack empathy, overwhelm the reader, be unclear, rude, offensive, or inconsistent. So that is literally how I started it off for myself, the very first exercise I did, because I clearly knew what I didn't want to sound like. And so then I was able to translate into do's. Okay, if I don't want to be impersonal, I want to make sure we're sounding approachable. If I'm really against jargon that feels too inclusive or exclusive, I want to make sure that we sound conversational. So it's really helpful to kind of break it down that way and kind of mirror and do apples to apples with the opposites, or apples to oranges. Thirdly, we're this, not that exercise. It's a similar exercise, but a little bit more structured. And I really like this one. And this is because we're so enthusiastic about our brand. We might be so certain and know who we are, what the business represents. But then in our enthusiasm, we can kind of teeter on the edge of excess. And when it comes to humanizing your brand, we are not single dimension. We are multifaceted. We even have this tension, you could have a very outgoing introvert, right? And that's the beauty of being human. And so why I like wear this, not that exercise is it's making sure we're kind of bringing it in and making sure there's still that balance and giving boundaries to the brand voice. So to do so, you just pick 5 to 7 brand adjectives. And then once you finish your list, kind of pick top 3 and alternate and say, okay, well, if we're A, well, we want to make sure we're not going too far over on the spectrum and being this way. And so what I mean by that is, for example, we're quirky. Well, quirky can come across way too strong if it's not balanced and you don't have that boundary. So we're quirky, but we're not childish. And so making sure that you're still adding a depth of professionalism and authority within that boundary. And then here's another one. A lot of sassy brands out there, sometimes they can take it a bit far. So again, you want to bring that balance back in. We're sassy, but not tacky. We're making sure that we qualify this and add nuance, because we're human. There is nuance to all of our attributes and personalities, and ensuring that you're still underscoring the authenticity and the substance of the brand by making sure you're not going too far on the sassy kind of spectrum. And lastly, create a glossary or word bank. So this is a bit more tangible. You're literally writing down words that you will or will not use. And after you've done all the exercises that we've worked on before, you want to sound empowering. Well, do you want to use words like weak? You might not realize it, but even if you're speaking the brand narrative and you use the word weak, even though you're trying to convey that's what they felt before, or they felt, depressed or whatever it may be, or insecure, our brains hear that word and associate the brand with it. So it is important that you make sure that whatever you do choose, make sure you know what types of vocabulary to use and what to stay away from. Are you going to use analogies? Are you going to use idioms? Are you going to use emojis? There are no rules to this, but it's about getting clear on it and putting it on paper so that as you grow your business and you have a team work with you, it's consistent, there's balance, and we're never too far one way or another. And so you can put this all together in a brand voice guide. And just like you've probably heard visual brand style guidelines, which provide kind of that blueprint for how you visually represent your business, which is the colors, fonts, logos, imagery, all that. It's just as important to have a brand voice guide as well, which is your roadmap for how your brand should sound and express itself through the content. So bringing together all those exercises and really coming up with a document that outlines, well, this is how we need to sound and present ourselves across all platforms, social media, in person, newsletters, e-marketing, whatever it is, making sure that no matter who touches it, who writes it, it's all consistent. And this is just going to be a random plug. If anyone who's gotten into the world of artificial intelligence, yes, there's some scary things with Chat GPT, and we're still learning how to figure out the ethics. But what I love to use it is I train it on my brand voice. I write something and it helps me fine tune it. So I say, okay, this is lacking, and it'll even audit for me and say, you know what, it's lacking a little bit of personality. You're sounding too corporate, which is my downfall all the time because that's my background. So it's really helpful to use tools to kind of audit yourself, because sometimes when you're in it, it's difficult to see. So before we go, I would love to give you something to take away. So if you go to this URL, the sozostudio.com/free-brand-voice-template, there's a freebie there. All you have to do is you just have to opt in, and it's actually a Google Sheet that you can download for free and work through some of this stuff yourself, so you can kind of get started on the road to building out your brand voice. I'm just reading a comment here by Cindy. My problem too, recent corporate quitter. Yes, I'm 30 years out and I still find it coming back. So it's helpful for you to, even when you've got that brand voice template and that guide, to kind of go back and come back to the basics and be like, oh yeah, right, this is what I need to be focusing on. All right, I tried to get through a lot of content quickly, so I apologize if any of it was too fast for you, but feel free to ask me any questions now, anything specific to what you're struggling with or what you'd like input on. I think we still have a few minutes, right, Patrice? Yep, okay. I'm just gonna take a drink of water.
We do. And I was wondering, one of the questions that somebody did have while you're drinking is the drinking water.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yes. Do you have a direct link? Can you put it in the chat? The
direct
one
link
that you just sent to the free templates? It's easier for them to grab it.
Yeah, no problem. I usually do that and I didn't get to it, but yeah.
I tried looking for it on the website, but it wasn't easy to find.
Yeah, no worries. Type in it right now. Let me go back to it too.
I found that really interesting. And I think a takeaway that I'm going to work with, to even sharing with clients and everything, is your words we don't use. Like sometimes we're always looking for, what do we use? What? And then we forget, oh yeah, what can we eliminate? I think that was a good.
Yep. Definitely. And sometimes working from that backwards, that, okay, if you're struggling with getting clarity on your own, work with what you don't want to sound, or what words to stay away from, especially like if you're working with a really sensitive clientele. I have quite a few therapists that are clients of our studio. There are certain words that are triggering. And so it's literally in their glossary that says, we are not going to use these words. Whether they're trying to teach about these concepts, they're going to have to come up with more creative, different ways of conveying the same topic without using these words that trigger them, because then people just shut down. So it's really about being sensitive to people, and it works across all businesses and all industries.
Excellent. So does anyone have questions for Sharai today? That was, I loved how clear it was, and it was a formula, follow.
Yeah, corporate again. I think
nothing wrong with it, right? It's how we
nothing wrong with it. I've tried to bring in the best of both worlds. I love what I do now, and I love that there is not this box around me anymore, but there's a lot that can be learned from both the entrepreneurial world and corporate. And yeah, it's amazing what we can learn along the way.
For sure. So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. We do have a few more minutes. I'm going to come up with a couple if that's okay with you.
Sure, go ahead.
And my first question is, typically when clients reach out to you, what are they struggling with?
So are you talking about me personally in the studio?
Yes. So
Okay,
if
okay.
a client was coming to you, typically what are they struggling with?
They
What's the
are
problem?
struggling with the wrong type of leads coming their way and really losing out on the value of referrals. So what happens, I see a lot of this, is you offer a great product, you offer a great service, someone recommends you, and then when they land on your website or they land on your social media, there's a disconnect from the referral and the recommendation with what that person is experiencing. So, with psychology, you think about it, as soon as there's that disconnect, well, wait, this woman said she was so down to earth and so, you know what I mean? Or this business has got so much experience and you don't convey that, then you're losing out because you lose that trust factor. And by making sure that it's kind of that journey all the way through, that way it helps optimize the leads and make sure you're not losing out on valuable referrals.
That's a really excellent point, because and you addressed it at the beginning, where from a visual perspective, we often keep notes, and that's something that is transferable with us. So if we move on to somebody else who helps us, or it's our first time getting help, etc., we help those who are helping us better by having these things documented. And it's the same we would do with images, like our colors, our fonts, etc., the words. So that's a really valid point. Again, I'm seeing lots of praise for the presentation. So if I'm, I don't see dragging you on, Sharai, is there a question that we have not asked that's typically asked at these type of presentations for you?
I find that my presentations end up giving you a lot of homework. So people are usually kind of like, oh, okay, I got to go sit on this. So it's not unusual to not have a lot of questions, but yeah, sorry. It's good work. I promise it's good work. It's very, kind of clarifying for yourself as well.
For sure. Well, with that, I'm not going to take up any more of your time. And thank you so much for sharing what you shared. To those persons who are watching this on the YouTube channel, thanks for joining us as well. But especially to those who showed up today and in live, it's not in person, but it's live. I hope you got a lot out of it. And yes, some work to do, but you know what? It's worth it, because you're worth it.
Exactly. Sorry to interrupt before Angie, I think I saw you raise a hand. Do you have a question?
I was just going to ask about brand evolution. So I'm assuming maybe over time, you're going to maybe change some of these things, and like how can you kind of tell when you're in a stage where you have to kind of revisit some of these activities, I guess?
When you're asking that question.
Okay.
That's the first tell, is if you think it's like, people think, oh, I must be such a terrible business owner or mom or whatever. And it's like, no, that's probably a good sign you are, because you're asking the questions. So that would be my first answer, is it's time.
Great answer. Thank you.
Yep.
And that was a great question. And one last thing, if you're not aware, we're doing a kickoff event. So Business Advisory Center of Durham is doing a kickoff event in January. I don't have the dates, but it is on our event page. It's in the month of January 2024. I can't believe we're already thinking about that, but it's actually less than, I think, 8 weeks away. So Sharai, thank you again for your time, for your expertise, and for sharing some great content with all of us today. I hope you too also get a chance to come out to some of our events and do it in Durham. Remember, everybody, if you're going to hire, if you're going to invest, if you're going to start a grow a business, do it in the Durham region. Bye for now.
Preach. Bye now.